podcast. This week we've got Richard Shenton. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Dom. Thanks for having me.
We finally got to meet up. Obviously, this is a little bit delayed with me snapping my bicep tendon, so not being able to drive. But we're here. Where are we? Sandhurst. So talk us through your session so far.
So far, I've got down to the lake. Got here early doors this morning. With it being on my doorstep, I'm only 3-4 minutes away from the lake. I've had quite a few good sessions on here as of late. It's one of those waters where it's got a good stock of fish. I've been fortunate enough to fish here over the years, working for the likes of Corder and for Total Carp, doing features. I think the swim we're in, 13, it generally gets a little bit overlooked. You know, you've got your kind of prolific swims. Everyone tries to jump in. You know, the Pipes 2, the Secret, Tom Dove and Darryl Peck have both done well out of that end of the lake as well. So they're generally kind of the hot spots. But the fish do move around in here, and if you can get down this end where there's less pressure, you do stand a chance of picking off one or two. Most of the bites do tend to come early hours, so first thing in the morning or last thing at night, but there is a good chance of picking one out through the day as well.
I mean, it's a well-known water, isn't it, Sandhurst? Talk us through the stock, just for the people that don't know it.
It is. It's probably one of the most prolific day ticket waters in the country. It's probably, don't quote me, but about 400 to 450 fish in here. A good head of 40s and a good head of 30s. I think there's 14 40s at the right time of year.
Right.
Obviously, you got fish like pinheads, Niger's fish that are in here. A good head of red mire commons as well. I did a session on here with Loz beginning of the year, I think it was, and he managed to winkle one out. And you know, they're stunning looking fish. It's had an algae bloom earlier on in the year as well, which I think has, I wouldn't say hindered the fishing, but it slowed it up a little bit. Nick and the rest of the guys have been busy working away. He's got aerators all round now that are going to stay in all through the winter as well. And the algae that was on here is now gone. There's been plenty of fish coming out over the last couple of weeks. It's one of those, I think, people tend to pile the bait in. You don't necessarily have to do that on it. You know, biggest thing is location. If you can find the fish, putting a rig on them. If you're putting anything in front of a feeding fish, they'll generally have it, but applying little and often, fishing for a bite at a time tends to seem to work quite well. Yeah,
and that's your sort of style of fishing, I suppose. You're hectic on the work front, aren't you?
Yeah, my style of fishing generally over the years has always been fishing for a bite at a time, quick overnighters. My time's quite limited, especially now I've got a little one. You know, she's only 6 months old, so time on the bank is valuable, and I want to make the most of it and put everything in my corner. So all the 1% that make a difference, you know, I'm fishing for a bite at a time, solid bags, singles with a little stick, you know, just trying to pick the fish off. I haven't really got time to fill it in bait and weight and try and pick them off that way. You know, the old saying goes, you can put it in but you can't take it out. So I try and fish, try and nick one and then just top it up every now and again.
Yeah, I mean, so it's that location thing again, isn't it? Spending that time.
Yeah, 10 minutes in the right place is better than 10 hours in the wrong place.
Yeah. Doing the laps and finding them. I mean, do they spread out quite a lot there? Or?
Yeah, they are quite spread around the lake. I got here first thing this morning. There's a few showing up this end, which is why I decided to set up on here. Like I say, most of the bites do come early hours, but between about 7 and 10 o'clock, there's about 3 or 4 shows. I think the guys that were opposite us last night had a few as well, and I think the guys that were on the island had seen a few to their right, so they're definitely up this end.
Right, okay. And obviously this has got winter form, hasn't it, this lake?
It's got real good winter form. Back in the day, it used to be kind of maggots, zigs used to work on here really well. Obviously, they've been banned on here now for various reasons. The biggest one being that the fish were losing weight.
Right.
You know, they weren't really gaining a lot by having maggots and zigs. You know, getting boilies in them and food that they're actively seeking out has helped put weight on, and the fish are looking really healthy at the minute.
And has that affected the winter fishing, or has it only just been introduced?
I don't think it's really affected the winter fishing. I think, you can still pick them off on here if you're fishing the right tactics.
Yeah.
Crumb in the winter and any other time of the year is a devastating method. There's not really a lot of food there for them, but there's that attraction, a carpet of feed with a few boilies over the top's enough to nick a bite and hold them there grubbing around. The fish aren't moving around as much as they would be earlier in the year, so if you get a pod of fish move on you, then if you can hold them there, you've got a good chance of picking them off as well.
Yeah. Is it sort of known for bigger hits on here?
I wouldn't say bigger hits. I think if you get the tactics right, you can get a good hit of fish, but again, it's introducing little and often, fishing for a bite at a time, and then if they move in on you, putting a few spoms over the top just to hold them there.
Yeah, nice. And so I've never fished this one before. Does it do margin bites?
You can do margin bites. I mean, you haven't got to fish at range on here. I think the furthest really you're looking at fishing at is 21, 22 wraps, and you can pick them off close in. Pipes 2 is generally quite a good swim for doing that, and so's 19 and 16 you can pick them off in the edge. Again, it's just finding those little areas, presenting a hook bait over it and picking them off that way.
Yeah, obviously with how busy you are, I mean, we spoke quite a bit off the mic earlier. You can get a call at any time, I suppose, can't you? So
yeah, generally there's doing the photography and videography. I could be up and down the country. I'd say use the term on call if anyone needs me to do any filming or any capture shots. I'm generally out and about, so I'm travelling light and staying as mobile as possible, really.
Yeah, that's. I suppose that helps your fishing, doesn't it? I mean, again, we were saying about how light you do travel if you need to move on fish as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest advantage of being mobile is if I'm carrying minimal gear and the guy opposite me's got everything with him, a big bivvy, his TV, God knows what else with him. If I see fish showing, I've got that opportunity to pack down quicker, move on to the showing fish and hopefully try and bag one or two of them. And again, the biggest thing I'm carrying around with me is my camera gear. I don't want to be carrying loads of extra stuff that I don't necessarily need or don't want to be taking with me. It's, the lads on here all laugh at me with how small my tackle box is, but within that tackle box I'm carrying the essentials that I need for a session. Anything else I've generally got in the van. I can always go back there and grab it. I don't want to be carrying so much gear with me. It's cumbersome and then I'm slower to get onto the fish.
Yeah, that's a really valid tip. And again, we were talking, that's similar to what I've done. It just makes such a massive difference, doesn't it? Something so simple, but I think as well, sort of doing regular audits of your kit, because things tend to sneak in, don't they?
Yeah, they do, yeah. Having that clear out. Most people now will kind of be sorting their gear out ready for autumn.
Yeah.
Putting away some of the summer stuff that you don't necessarily need and getting kind of their winter and autumn prep ready.
Yeah. How does that change for you in your fishing as we approach the cooler months?
I think the biggest thing for me in the cooler months is bait prep. My hook baits are already 3 or 4 months in advance, getting them ready, making sure I've got essentials like head torches are charged, thermals. Being on the bank in the colder months, you need to be prepared for it. If you're uncomfortable, you're not going to fish effectively, you're not going to fish well. Making sure you've got a flask with you, or warm socks, a hat, gloves, anything like that that's going to make the session more comfortable without having too much gear.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed with a lot of anglers is during the warmer months they'll have Polaroids, but in the winter they tend not to use them.
Right.
But I think in the winter they're just as valuable as they are in the summer, helping you finding fish. And in regards to obviously where the daylight hours are fading, making sure you've got good lighting. If you're doing your capture shots, you don't want to be leaving that fish in the water for hours and on end, waiting for the sun to rise and then do your shots. You want to be doing them at night. Leave the fish in the water, make sure it's safe, have an external flash or good lighting. that's probably the biggest thing I would say, is make sure you're prepared for those night shots.
Yeah.
Do your shots, get the fish back safely, rather than leaving it in there for hours on end. You know, it's a lot of places now generally don't allow you to sack fish anyway,
Yeah.
but leaving it in the retainer for hours on end just isn't the one.
Yeah. So that sort of moves us on nicely. Let's talk a bit about photography. Obviously, that's what you're known for, as we mentioned, the videography and photography. So things like self-takes, external flashes and things. Talk us through a bit about that, because obviously if you can have that all prepped and what to go for, what you might recommend.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say is obviously don't overcomplicate it. Make sure everything's all ready to go. You've got your unhooking mat, you've got your water. A tripod's obviously a massive advantage when you're doing your self-takes. An external flash and lighting and a remote or an intervalometer will help you with those shots as well. Obviously, if you've got someone that can do it for you, great, but you don't always have that luxury when you're on your own.
Yeah.
And just make sure you're proportioned well. There's so many advantages now with modern technology where you can connect your camera to your phone through Wi-Fi, gives you a live stream so you can actually see yourself on your phone through your camera. With certain models, obviously, you've got the flip screen where you can turn it around and see yourself on it. Make sure you're proportioned, take your time, get the picture right, and obviously it's down to personal preference, obviously, what model you'll use, whether it's a Nikon, a Canon or a Sony. But a 35mm or 50mm lens is personally probably one of the main go-to lenses I'd use for capture shots. You know, get your main shots of the fish, both sides, then worry about all your carpy shots afterwards.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I would say.
Yeah.
And obviously everything in focus. You know, I think people tend to rush, get the shots done, put them back, and then regret not taking that little bit of time to make sure there was no rubbish in the background or the water bucket or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, get yourself all sorted first, leave the fish in the water, and then do your shots.
So in terms of obviously focus, I mean, how would you set up a camera, obviously with the autofocus that's available now? Talk us across, so you work with different models, I think Sony and Canon mostly. How would you say, if you were doing self-take, what would you do? Would it just be like so I assume you wouldn't do like eye autofocus or anything like that, would you? Would it just be like a middle of the screen setup, or?
I generally, with my photography, I'll do most of it in manual. So even if I'm doing a self-take, I'll have a bucket or a pole or something where I would generally be holding the fish, manually focus on to that area, and then make sure when I'm holding the fish it's in line with what I've manually focused on, and then do my self-take. Obviously, with so many models on the market, there is that option to do autofocus, do tracking on it as well. And with the intervalometer, it allows you to fire off X amount of shots, so many second intervals. It's a great way of getting those shots and not getting any motion blur in it as well. You know, it's the biggest thing I would say is make sure the area is well lit and adjust it accordingly. Do it that way.
Right, brilliant. Yeah, that's a real good tip. So, obviously, in terms of the video stuff, again, we mentioned that off mic. That's pretty intense. The back end, isn't it? I mean, we've talked about this before. I think a lot of people don't quite appreciate the amount of stuff that goes into, let's say, making a feature half-hour film.
Yeah,
that must be a big part of your life.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
I'm from the computer.
I'm quite lucky. I've got a understanding girlfriend, and you know, there is a lot of time and effort that does go into the editing side of things. It's, you know, you're out on the bank for hours, if not days on end, doing all of the videography, backing it all up, and then the actual process of piecing it all together is, you know, it's a huge task, and anyone that does it within the industry can obviously vouch for that themselves. But, you know, piecing it together, adding music to it as well, you know, the audio, taking out all of the stuff that shouldn't be in there and making sure all of the stuff that should be in there is, and it is very easy to get into that mindset of where you're watching everything over and over again. You do miss certain bits. You have to take a step back and re-watch it. It's like anything. If you're writing a story and you go back to it 2 days later, there's stuff in there that you'd take out and minimise, and stuff that you'll add in and make sure it's got the key points to it.
Right. How did you learn it all? Are you self-taught? Have you just picked it up as you've gone along? Or?
Yeah, a lot of it self-taught for years and years on end. Was, a lot of people probably don't know, but by trade I was a tree surgeon and landscaping for 17 years,
Right.
and kind of doing a lot of stuff within the industry for companies, free of charge, building a name and a reputation for myself. And I was fortunate enough to end up working for Total Carp and Advanced Carp Fishing at the time, working alongside people like Dan Morell and Kate as well over there, the designer. Kind of getting into it at the time wasn't, I wouldn't say as easy as now, but there's so many people that have got a phone or a camera where they can just rattle off pictures or videography. Yeah. It is a hard industry to get into, and it really does consume a lot of time. People always saying to me, how do you get into it? If you're going to do it, you do have to eat, sleep and breathe it, and there are sacrifices along the way, but you've got to be willing to make them to further yourself. But going back to how did I get into it, starting off with Total Carp, doing features and doing the social media side of things and the videography with them, and then eventually venturing off over to Corda and doing the social media side of things over there, sponsoring angling, coordinator, managing a team of anglers and getting out doing the videography with those guys, and also working on flagship projects like Think and Tackle. They're all intense projects where you're out on the bank for days on end. Like I say, it is time consuming, but it's worth every minute of doing it, and you've got to be prepared to sacrifice that time. Birthdays and nights out, they do go on the back foot, and that is kind of the nature of the beast, if you like.
Yeah. Have you always been into the carp scene? Has it always been carp, or is it?
Oh, I've fished for over 35 years now, and it started off like most people did, a float, kind of going out for day sessions with my dad, and kind of progressing along the way and getting into carp fishing. I'm quite fortunate that I live in Carp Mecca. I'm right in the heart of Yateley, surrounded by water, so I've kind of grown up through the years at college and school, and fishing's always been an outlet just to get out on the bank, not necessarily just about the catching, but just being in the environment as well. It's something that I do love doing, and I've always enjoyed the buzz of being there for other people when they've caught as well.
Yeah,
taking the capture shots, catching a bit of that video, but I'm renowned with the lads for having waders and spending half my time in the water without putting them on, because I don't want to miss that moment, and I want to be there to enjoy it. And it is a huge buzz, especially when you're seeing friends that are catching fish that they've spent so long trying to target, and they are sought after carp. And that's kind of transpired throughout the years, and doing it for a living, you never really lose that buzz. And I think if you did, then it's time to stop doing it.
Because it has to be a passion, like you say, with this sheer amount of hours, and it's not a 9 to 5 either, is it?
No, it's not a 9 to 5, and anyone else, like I say, that works in the industry, they'll know that you're up, you're filming or doing photography all through the day, and then as soon as you're backing everything up, you're editing, and it is early hours, late start, late finishes, early starts. It's not a 9 to 5, and I think if it would be, that would be quite a luxury, but I don't think you would kind of get the same sort of rewards as you do from spending hours on end doing it.
Yeah. Are there any standout captures that sort of spring to mind?
I think probably one of the biggest standout captures for me is Pecky with a coconut common.
Right.
I think just for the sheer fact that it blew our mind that the fish come out in 14 foot of water in 30 odd degrees when we'd been chasing it for 5 days with zigs, and it was just one of those captures where it had been such hard graft trying to get amongst the fish and get one for camera, to then have one on a solid bag in 14 foot of water was just it's just ridiculous, really. It's just law of averages. Say you would have thought it would have come out on zigs, and even in my own fishing over the years, I've fished with so many anglers where I've picked up little bits here and there and honed my skills further, But I think where you kind of put all of those little bits in your armoury and you use them as well, it has helped put me more fish on the bank. You know, like I said, my fishing is quick overnighters, short sessions. I'm always making sure that everything's prepared and ready to go, sort of thing. It's all the 1% that make a difference.
Yeah. Do you find also, I suppose you're in that aspect, you're in obviously such a privileged position, working with so many names in the trade and cleaning everything you can. Is there a chance of getting overwhelmed by it? Because obviously, I suppose people do things so many different ways and get results.
Yeah, I think you can overcomplicate it by using so many different baits, so many different rigs. I think it can be overwhelming, but I think if you've got a rig that you know that works, a bait that you've got complete confidence in, it's literally just a case of waiting for the fish to turn up. I mean, I generally only use 2 or 3 rigs, and I've had great success on them. And if it's not broken, don't fix it. You know, I'll adapt to the situation, but one of those rigs will cover almost every situation that I'm fishing in.
Yeah.
I'm not an extreme range angler. Most of my work is either with a baiting spoon or close range, and you know, you see so many people cast into the horizons, spomming at range when you could catch a fish that's 2 or 3 rod lengths off the bank just as effectively.
Yeah.
I think, like going back to what we said earlier, is location. If you find where those fish are and you put a rig that you know is presented in front of them, you will catch them. You know, I think sometimes we give fish too much credit and other times not enough.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, fish haven't got hands. If they see something, the only way they can find out what it is by mouthing it.
Yeah, yeah. In terms, obviously, you've built up your photography kit over the years, I assume. What would you be able to sort of recommend a setup, let's say a budget setup that would be sort of, you know, for someone getting into it that hasn't got loads of money to spend, what would be like the go-to set? Let's say 1 lens and 1 body.
I mean, I'd say a great camera to start off with that's not going to break the bank. You know, Canon's a great way of starting off. You know, again, it is down to personal preference, whether it's Canon or Nikon. I've always been Canon and Canon glass.
Yeah.
Lens-wise, I would say either a 35mm or 50.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing I would say is learn how to use that body and lens is the biggest thing. You could have an all singing and all dancing camera kit, you know, body, lens, top of the range, but if you don't know how to use it properly, you're never going to get the best out of that camera.
Yeah.
A Canon 750D is a great camera. You know, it's got a wireless function on it, flip screen, NTSC on it as well. You know, there's a huge buzz for people trying to get pictures straight off the camera onto their phone and up on media. You know, it's a great way of doing that. But I would say, yeah, the biggest thing for me is make sure you know how to use that camera properly.
Yeah, I suppose there's so many tutorials available online as well now, isn't there?
Yeah, there's so much online now. Obviously, YouTube's a massive advantage. You know, if there's anything you generally don't know how to do, you can type it in there, and there's 101 ways of how to do it, what to do. And I'm sure we've all been there with something at home, whether it's DIY or, you know, if you need to know how to do it, you've got on there to find out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've done that. No, that's a brilliant tip. Obviously, do you find, I know, and obviously you've got photography and videography, they're not, you know, one takes more time than the other, but do you find yourself doing more one than the other? Do you do more stills than video, or the other way around? Obviously, I know video takes way longer editing.
Yeah, I'd kind of say it's on par, really. I mean, generally, with the lakes around me, I'm on call to go and do capture shots for a lot of people. There's a lot that obviously don't make it onto my social media or theirs because people are still doing their seasons and they don't want those captures released or anything. But then in the same token, I'm doing a lot of videography for a lot of companies within the industry, whether people know it's my work or not. You know, I'm constantly doing those sort of bits as well as the stills, but the videography does generally take a lot of time, and you know, it's the creative side of it, creating the story, you know, making sure the video is paced so people don't lose interest. You know, you can change the whole way a video is perceived just by the music that's added to it.
Yeah.
So, you've got to make sure that it's appealing to the massive rather than the minority. But I'd kind of say it's on par, really. I do quite a lot of videography and a lot of photography, and I've done the odd bit that isn't fishing related as well.
Right.
And there's transferable skills from them that you can put into the angling side of things.
Yeah, I suppose just the editing thing could easily be a full-time job, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of companies within the industry that just solely have editors rather than having a videographer that does the editing as well.
Yeah.
You'll have companies that just have videographers, you've got editors, and then you've got your guys that just do your stills.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's an advantage if you can do all three, or the videography and
you
the
get that
photography.
synergy, I suppose, then, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, you can shoot to edit as well then. So your videographer's planning that edit in his head of how he's going to do it in regards to how he's filming as well.
Yeah. And again, have there been people that you've looked up to in the trade in terms of that you've picked up bits off from the video side?
Yes and no. I mean, for me, it's more the angler that I'm working with. There's a lot of people that I've had inspiration from over the years, and as a youngster that I've looked up to, and I've been fortunate enough to work alongside those or fish alongside them as well. There's obviously, when you are filming, you do get the odd occasion where you can get the rods out as well. Obviously, the angler is always the main focus of the video, but if you've got any downtime and you can get a rod out, just being lucky enough to do that with anglers that you've looked up to through the years is obviously a huge advantage, and you do pick a lot up from working with these guys. And I've been fortunate enough to work with the likes of Pecky, Dave Lane, those sort of guys that have really cut their teeth on certain waters, and I've either read about it as a youngster and then been able to fish with them on said waters as well.
Wow, yeah. It does. I would say it seems like the dream job if you're not shy of putting the hours in.
No.
I think, I'd love to have your job. I imagine you get to hear that quite a lot.
Yeah, I do. And I think, anyone that is in the angling industry that's been able to make it as their full-time job and get paid to work in the trade. We're all in a very privileged position, but we've all had to work extremely hard to get to where we are. And you do have to sacrifice and put the hours in, and that is the only way you'll make it, is by putting those hours in. And it's not for the faint-hearted that just want to work Monday to Friday 9 to 5, because it isn't a 9 to 5 job. You can be on the road all week, get home, literally have time to get a shower, get changed, and you're straight back out again.
That was going to be my question. I imagine it's quite travel intensive as well.
It is, yeah. I'm sure a lot of us put quite a few miles on the old car or van through the year, and it is one of those things. You are constantly on the move. There's a huge expanse of water up and down the country with anglers fishing both the UK and abroad, and nowadays everyone wants to see that sort of Euro side of it, or the kind of fishing in Belgium and France, and obviously they want to see it. We have to cover it. You've got to travel to do that, and it's a mammoth task. All the prep that goes into that, as well as filming it, all the preparation to going over there, to making sure you've got batteries, backing everything up, and taking everything off the hard drives, backing it all up remotely as well. It's time consuming, but I wouldn't change it for the world, and I love doing what I'm doing. And again, like I say, I'm fortunate enough to have a partner that's really understanding and lets me crack on with it without being on my back or anything. That is the other thing. It can test relationships if you don't have someone that is understanding, and for those that are faint-hearted, it doesn't work out for them in the long run.
How many camera batteries do you own? Any idea?
Too many. Light. I think during the summer it's a case of you go through them quick as anything, and in the winter you can never charge them quick enough. It's a case of keeping them warm, and there's been countless nights where I've had to put camera batteries at the bottom of my sleeping bag to keep them warm, so that I've got them for the following day.
It's all stuff like that you only get the experience, isn't it, really?
It is, yeah.
Because you can imagine a rookie going to do something there in sort of, their first big shoot in the middle of winter.
I think
something like that happening.
I think we've all been there at some point in our career where you've learnt by a mistake, or I think the biggest thing for people that do photography at night is the humidity change with a lens. You take the cap off the front and off the back, put it on your camera, and it's all steamed up before you've even used it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the ideal situation for that would be to have your lens already on the camera and just have a jumper or something over it just to leave it to climatise, so that if you get a shot in the middle of the night where you're doing capture shots, you then haven't got to set it all up and waiting for it to clear and then use it. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that making sure you're prepared will help you in the long run. As soon as you've got a fish, you're all good to go. And setting bank sticks or markers either side of your unhooking mat, you then know you're framed, or putting a mark on the floor where your tripod needs to go. All those little things will help. Obviously, like I said, if you've got someone that could do pictures for you, great. But if you haven't, then you need to be prepared that if you do catch something during the night, you're all good to go.
Yeah, and I suppose, especially in those colder months when the banks are typically quieter, there's going to be less chance of someone doing it.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's ideal for your serious angler, with the fair weather anglers that have packed up and hung up the gear ready for Christmas and stuff like that. But I think if you're seasoned anglers that are out there doing there isn't anyone on the bank that can do pictures. I'm sure we've all got people that we can call to come down and do them, but if they're a good few hours away and the days are shorter and drawing in, you don't want to be leaving fish either in the retainer or sacked up for long periods of time.
Yeah, definitely. Is your phone always on?
Yeah. It's
How's
generally
that for you? Just used to it, I suppose.
I think it's just a way of life now. It's generally on all the time. Most of the guys will give me a ring, and within a couple of hours I'm there doing pictures as soon as possible, really.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a day off as a cameraman.
I'd imagine if you were to do diary piece or a sort of collaboration of all of yours over the years, like interruptions in all sorts of times, meals, dinners, everything else.
I think classic sort of example of that is my birthday last year. I'd had a couple of the lads that were fishing the Yateley waters, and the session kicked off for them, and they'd had quite a few 30s, but by this point I'd had too many drinks to be able to drive, so I had to get a lift down and a steady hand with the camera and do their capture shots for them. But it is the buzz of being there, and when you see the fish on the bank, it's something that you just don't want to miss. You want to be a part of it, and there's no better feeling.
That is a really big part, I think, because it's just the atmosphere. Because you know what it feels like, don't you? Especially if it's a target on a tricky water, even or a PB or anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
That buzz, you can't replicate that, really.
No,
can
you can't. No.
It's and to be part of it, especially, I completely agree with you. Even to be a part of it with someone else, being part of that moment, it's a hell of a feeling. With all the video side of things, do you have to diarise that sort of quite far in advance?
Yeah, I mean, most of it will be backed up, and then you'll have I generally have a timeline of stuff that needs to be turned around and produced and given out to various companies. So 9 times out of 10 it is as soon as possible, really. There is stuff you obviously keep back for retrospective videos or stuff that's due to come out later in the year, but most of the time it is just a continual roll. I mean, for me personally, I like to try and turn around the video as soon as possible because it's fresh in your mind, and that session is generally there in the moment, sort of thing. I think the more you get out and the more you do, it's quite easily to get snowed under, and your mind's not generally fixed on that one topic or that one piece then.
So I suppose workflow is quite important. Do you have everything sort of systemised? Have you got like a sort of a routine that you follow?
Yeah, I mean, I've generally got a routine that I follow, and everything is is kind of an assistant, like you
Right.
say, but it is the biggest thing's time management and timekeeping. I think when it comes to it,
Yeah.
is making sure that you don't take on too much that it affects the workflow, because
Yeah.
that's when problems start to
Yeah,
happen,
you
and
rush things
you
or
rush things
forget.
and things aren't done properly.
Yeah, that's. I think that time management is a real valid point. I mean, I know from running a business as well. I tend to underestimate how long things take a lot of time, which is the worst thing you can do, because all of a sudden, wallop, you said yes to everything, and there's just not enough guys to do it. Yeah, time management would be a good tip. Do you use any apps or anything like that, or is it all just on paper? That side of things?
I generally, most of my stuff is all on the computer. You know, I've probably got scraps of paper here and there and everywhere in my office, but I generally have a board with the month ahead or 2 months ahead with everything all on there of what I'm doing, when I'm next out, and try and manage it that way. I don't generally use apps as such for
Right.
managing it. I've got a dictaphone that comes with me everywhere, and I'll use that for making notes throughout the day of what I need to do, and when I get back, go through that and put it all onto my computer, onto a timeline, if you like, just to make sure that everything's on there.
Yeah, that's real good point. Even something like you say, as straightforward as that, having a board. I do similar with the heating business. Just so at a glance, you can see where everything is. Again, because overwhelm's another thing that creeps in, isn't it? When you think, I've got to be doing this, and it's like, what was that other thing I was going to do? And if it's not on that board, it's not getting done, is it? Something just popped out there. Where are you fishing in terms of relation?
I'm not far from that. I'm probably about 4 or 5 rod lengths off it.
Right. Not seen anything. Do they typically show in here or not?
First light is generally when
Yeah.
you'll see most of the shows. It's like most places.
Yeah.
Getting here in the hours of darkness obviously puts you in good stead with finding where the fish are.
Yeah.
And then, once you've got a rough idea where they are, they generally tend to stay here. They don't really move with the wind as much in here.
Right.
On most waters, you'd either, given the time of year, either follow the wind, fish on the front of it or the back of it.
Yeah.
In here, because there's quite a vast stock. I think you can pick them off from either end of the lake, really.
Yeah.
Down in the more prolific swims, there's quite a few lines out in the water and been spomming quite a lot, so I think hopefully it'll push the fish out this way.
Yeah. Just as we were speaking, I got shot on by a bird from the tree. Is that good luck? I don't think it hit me on the head.
Well, we're in
I was going to try and style it out.
we're in peg 13 as well, so maybe
Yeah.
good luck.
Let's have a look. Well, it didn't land on the laptop, so that's something. So obviously someone's coming down here. Obviously we'll sort of wrap up soon, but obviously Sandhurst, spend a bit of time finding the fish, and you think you're in with a good chance.
Yeah, I mean, pick the bailiff's brains as well on
Yeah.
here. They've got a good team of bailiffs on it. It's policed really well. They all know their stuff. They'll put you on spots, give you a bit of advice. And the biggest thing on here, I would say, on any water's carp care, but on here, you have to spray your nets, spray your mats. I generally, anything that gets wet or that's been in the water, I spray off anyway. We want the fish to go back in the same condition, if not better condition, than they come out. And there's fish in here that are in, they're old fish. They need looking after, and we want the next person to catch them and enjoy them just as much as we have.
Yeah.
But do your homework. Obviously, the website, you've got all of the rules. You've got captures that have been on there. You've got videos of sessions that have happened on here as well. But it's like any water. Do as much homework. Find out as much as you can about the venue before you get here. Don't come down with a swim in mind where you just want to rush and jump in it, because the fish may not necessarily be there. Your eyes are your most valuable weapon. Come down, find the fish, have a little lead around, find clear spots, and like I said, introduce a little bit of bait and fish for a bite at a time rather than filling it in just to, bait and wait. Those tactics can work. I'm not saying they won't, but I generally find on here, putting bait in a little bit at a time picks off the quicker bites.
Yeah, and obviously one question I'll ask, because I know I'll get asked a lot, or will get asked a lot after, for sort of budding people looking to get into the industry, photography and the videographer side. what sort of tips could you give them? Because obviously we mentioned quite a bit off mic when you talked about you would just offer yourself out, put in the work, almost volunteer.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing
name out there.
is persistence. Really, if you want to do it and you are keen on doing it, is offer your services. Whether it's work experience or taking photos for people, doing a little bit of videography. Just be as proactive as you can, and don't be afraid to work hard, because you have to. Like I said, there's so many people out there now. With the technology, with phones, it's so easy to do. Try and stand out from the norm, do something different that a lot of people aren't doing.
Yeah, I suppose you've got with Instagram and YouTube, you've got perfect platforms to showcase doing what you love. Just put it out there and you're not supposed to get found, aren't you?
Yeah,
these days.
Yeah, you've got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all those platforms to put your work across, and eventually you will get picked up. It is a hard industry to crack, and if once you're in it, if you put the hard work in, you'll get recognised and respected. But you have to be willing to put that time and effort in to stand out.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good sort of ethos to, not just for this, for anything in life really, isn't it, as well? You have to put a lot of that work in to get that ball rolling initially. It's well worth doing. Just keep doing it.
Yeah, you'll get out of it whatever you put in. If you put 110% into it, then you'll get that out of it.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a great way to wrap up. So thank you very much, Richard.
Cheers, thanks for having me.